Good morning, everyone. I apologize, there was a connection issue, but we're going to get started here pretty soon, just as soon as everybody gets in here. I see everybody joining right now, so just give it a couple of minutes.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. I apologize, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties this morning, and we will be getting started shortly.
Can we hear me now?
Yes.
All right.
Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning. That was a challenge. All right, so where are we at right now?
All right, Kevin, do you want to go ahead and just share your screen and then we can start with the presentation? Looks like we have about 124 participants. Okay, great. If you go to slideshow.
All right, where is that slideshow?
Right in the middle there at the top. Next to review. In the red.
Let's see.
In the meantime, while Kevin's looking for the slideshow, welcome everyone to our Zoom webinar. This is intended for ESRD health professionals. Although if you're not with an ESRD facility, I think you'll still find some benefit in this presentation. Kevin has a lot of great material to go over with us today. My name is Odette Colburn. I'm the Bureau Chief for Medical Facilities Licensing here at the Arizona Department of Health Services. And I am so excited that you're all here to learn all about emergency preparedness and a little bit about life safety code. Just a reminder, our mission and vision has mostly to do with collaboration. And so we're very excited to have you all here and be able to support your growth and your understanding of the regulations. You're not finding the slideshow view there, Kevin?
No, but I think that's because there's something right in front of it that I can't see it.
Okay. Well, this will work too. It's no problem.
I got this little black thing that says, who can see your transcript recording on?
Okay, that's fine. You can go ahead and get started if you want then. The next slide, I believe, is yours. Without further ado, here's Mr. Kevin Whitlock.
All right, everybody. I just want to welcome you here today, and thank Shirley for getting this set up for us, so we could get it out there and get to the ESRDs. A lot of changes from April of last year from CMS, so want to get all that stuff out to you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, just so you know where I come from and how I approach this thing. So I did some time in the Air Force as a firefighter and worked for Southwest Ambulance as a paramedic. The big part was I did 34 years at Palo Verde on the generating station as a firefighter, and then I wrote procedures for the emergency preparedness group. And then I've been with DHS for about 2 years, and then the most important part is I have a wife who's a director of nursing, and she gives me a lot of good information and good ideas so that I learn here. To start off with, I want everybody to understand that when you're creating these, we got to share these because each of us has different backgrounds and different ideas that we come at this from. When I was a kid, the hometown that I lived in California, it's in drought-stricken area now, flooded bad. The water came 6 foot over the top of the dam. And so that was pretty traumatic to me, and I remember that. This horse, we had to rescue this horse. It was playing and it fell in the water trough. And that took a lot of thought how to do that, and we certainly weren't prepared for that. I think to the days that from the fire department where we were always testing our equipment and being prepared, and this is showing us testing a hazmat suit. And then we always want to look at our procedures and our stuff and make them better. This is Palo Verde's test procedures for testing the fire barriers inside of one of their units, and that's the amount of paperwork that has to be done. And before I left there, we were able to improve that quite a bit, but that was pretty rough. And then the one in the center, these were emergency batteries that were for the phone system, and they fell off a conveyor belt coming into the protected area at Palo Verde. And we got there and thought we were real smart, and we just stand them back up. And thankfully, we had a lot of input from a lot of people that said, "Oh no, you can't just do that. There's they'll explode. They have positive and negatives inside the batteries, and they'll explode." The big thing I want to point out here is all of this comes together, and the things that I learn and do here, I get a lot of this from you guys in addition to my background. So when I'm out surveying, I hear really good ideas, and I I usually take a copy of them and show them to other people. So just want to tell you a little bit about Palo Verde, just so that you know how I come at this. Every person at Palo Verde, and there's 2,600 normally and 3,200 when they're refueling, they have 3 jobs there. They make it clear to you have 3 jobs. They make you sign a contract. You have your normal job, you have your outage job when we're refueling, and you have emergency preparedness job. And a failure to do any one of the 3 is grounds for termination. So they take it very serious. I want to go back to the beginning and talk about where all of this came from. Okay, in 2016, CMS put out these rules. Okay, and they the purpose of this whole thing was to establish a national emergency preparedness requirements, basically to make us have a system where our whole country could work together if we were attacked or we had a major national disaster, such as a hurricane, which we've had a few. It's applicable to all 17 types of providers. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how you know what stuff applies to you. Okay. This all started back on 9/11, and that's when our country was attacked, and everybody knew about that. And they, the president at the time was George Bush, and he put in rules in place for first responders to come together and start working together. And they did do that, and they created something called the National Incident Management System. Okay, and everybody fought that at the time. Nobody wanted to do it. Everybody said my system is better, and so they said, well, if you don't do it, we're just not going to fund you. And so here we are 20 years later, and good luck finding a first responder in America that doesn't speak Nims, because they all do. Okay, FEMA's behind that. FEMA's gotten the blame for everything that's ever happened in our country, and they don't want that to happen anymore. Okay, so they go out and they create all these rules. You don't see FEMA's face on anything here at CMS, but believe me, they're behind the scenes. Okay, and they're talking to CMS, and they're talking to them through ASPR, which we're also going to talk about here in a second. Okay, every single time that there's a national disaster, FEMA and CMS learn lessons, and they change the rules to come up to compliance with these things that were learned at those events. And we're hoping that you're all going to do the same. When we finish here, I'm hoping we're all a big team, and you guys all will jump on board and help me out, make our system better. Okay. After that, the actual current rules that came out for us in 2016 were generated initially from Hurricane Katrina, and then Hurricane Sandy right after that. And then right after that, we had the Feather River Hospital in Paradise, California. 280 patients were evacuated in 30 minutes. If you look way back there in the trees, you can see some fire burning right there at the parking lot. You don't see any firemen, you don't see any ambulances helping them evacuate these patients. Very bad situation. Here in Arizona, we don't get a lot of disasters, and so we really don't think that it can affect us, and we have a minimalist attitude. And that's, like I say, there, COVID-19 should have taught us a lesson there. Okay, this was a Methodist hospital in New Orleans. How'd you like dealing with that? There's a couple examples that came out of New Orleans, and I highlighted a couple of them that were really, really important to remember when we write these plans, because they're very custom and they're very, very unique to your facility. Okay, but you can count on the fact that communications are going to be spotty at best. Okay, a couple of the phone companies now have phone plans that you can sign up for that identify you as a first responder or an emergency preparedness person, and they will put you on a special list, and your phone won't be cut off when things get busy. You can imagine when it comes to evacuation, no one had plans in place for boats and things like that. They had things like the hospitals, they had brought in those helicopters from the National Guard, and they couldn't find where to land because the hospitals didn't know their landing coordinates because they'd only used local ones in the past. They're high-rise hospitals. They only one of them only had 3 backboards in the whole facility to try to get people down from the top floors. One was a 16-story hospital. They have lots of problems, okay? Imagine this situation here, and your facility over there is looking all pretty, and all these people are out here like this, and they're thinking, wow, that place has got food, water, and it's got power, and it's got lots of things. We want those. Do you have the security to deal with that? All right, Hurricane Katrina. So the wind speed for that was 157 miles an hour, 1,800 fatalities, $125 billion damage. This was in August of 2005. 25 hospitals closed. 100 residents died in bed because they drowned because they couldn't rescue them. Okay. In Louisiana alone, there was 971 Katrina-related deaths. Everybody in the world got blamed for this, and I asked the question here. I want to, and I'll ask it in a form, but I want you to just answer to yourself. How many people you think died from lack of dialysis when healthcare was wiped off the map for 500 square miles? And I have researched and researched and researched, and the number is actually 0, which was amazing to me. But if you all remember, August 29th of on the 16th anniversary, so that was last year of Hurricane Katrina, another Category 4 hurricane hit the exact same spot. Wind speeds were 7 miles an hour less. The hurricane was pretty much just as powerful. They only had 33 deaths in Louisiana from that. And does anybody know the name of that hurricane? Odette, do you know it?
Kevin, I know the answer to this question.
Oh, I can't remember you remembered it. But
let's see if anybody else wants to raise their hand and maybe answer. I see Kim Graham has her hand up, but I don't know that it's in response to that. Oh, looks like Rebecca Gardner might have an answer.
Okay, can you know how to click on them?
Let me see if I can unmute. Oh, Katrina has an answer.
Katrina, she's my boss.
Hold on, let's see here. Oh, Rebecca says it's Ida.
That is correct, Ida. And I think most of you did not know that answer, because I find this a lot. And the reason that you don't know the answer, don't feel bad, it's because they were prepared. And they dealt with that hurricane, and basically the news media just up and left the next day. And that's the way we're going to be. We're going to be just as good as that. Okay. So we got some things to think about here that we're trying to create from this we're doing here. We want to prevent the facility from having to deal with a disaster. Okay. So that's the first thing we want to do. And then we want to be able to mitigate it if it does happen to us. And if we have things that take us out of service or out of business, particularly dialysis, we're going to get into how important dialysis is to our country. But I think you all know that since you're in that business. We have to be able to recover quickly. In Katrina, it took 3 to 4 months to get healthcare back in service in the area. So those people were traveling for hundreds of miles to get healthcare. And they said that's never going to happen again. Okay. So we got, where does all this come from? So these are conditions of participation. And if you were to look in 42 CFR 494.62, you'd find the conditions of participation for emergency preparedness for ESRDs. Okay. Let's look at this next one. You also have the Arizona revised statutes, and you guys are, you have this disaster stuff that you have to do in there. And that's coming out of Article 10. DEMA, I don't know if any of you know who DEMA is. The Department of Military and Emergency Affairs. They're over there on McDowell and 48th Street. They have some rules that give the governor lots of powers. And then Title 36 says Chapter 6, Article 2 and 4 dealing with contagious diseases. Maricopa County has some rules. Oops, sorry here. And you're going to all get copies of this, so I'm not going to go into every one of these things. I kind of got to get done today, but one of the things that Maricopa County wants you to do is every year, if you go to their website, you'll find this letter. And in it, they're going to want you to register. And the reason they want you to register is they keep track of all of the equipment that you have available and all the personnel that you have available. If you have nurses, if you have CRNAs, if you have MAs, and physicians assistants, they keep track of all of those. And if we have an emergency, they're able to call up everybody and get them to the point where we need them in an emergency. And the incident commander has control of that. Okay. And this is their annual contract that they want to have with you. One of the requirements from CMS is that you have somebody review your plan, and Maricopa County offers to do that for you. If you send them your information, they'll review your plan and sign off. So how do we do this? Now that we got the regulations, this is the most important thing. I hope everybody is able to get their hands on the state operations manual. If you don't, you can see my screen here, and I will take you down here and take you on a trip real quick in here, and you can just type in cms.gov. Okay, this will come up. Hit the regulations. Go over here and click on manuals. Click on internet only manuals.
We can't see that, Kevin, but we can send out the instructions for sure if that's needed.
Okay, all right. Wow, that's interesting. All right, let me bring this back up. Okay, yeah, we certainly can do that for you, because that's a key way you're going to be able to follow this. When you get to the state operations manual, like I said, it applies to all 17 providers, and so you're going to find that you have to scroll through there and find when it applies to you. So some of you I know that are on this call are from cause, and so yours are right here. And I don't know, can you see my cursor moving?
No, we can just see the PowerPoint, Kevin. Okay. I'm going to share the link in the chat though for the CMS SOM. Okay, perfect. So you'll have to, yours is 485.625, and you have to write that number down. And then there's some ASC people in here, and that's 41654. And then most everybody that's in here is in-stage renal facilities, and that's 494.62. And so, like I said, write that down. And when you scroll down to the pages, there's 113 pages in the SOM, and that's the state operations manual. So just make sure that it's not the SOM, the Bible one you're thinking of. When you get down through there, you're going to see these things called E-tags, and this is one of them, and this is E-tag 3. And if you notice, 494.62 conditions of coverage, this applies to dialysis facilities. This is the first one that does. E-tag 1 and 2 don't apply to you, and so you don't have to meet it. Okay, and when you're looking at these, they're pretty cool. They do explain everything that's needed, but more importantly, at the end of each E-tag, it says the survey procedures. Okay, and that tells you exactly what we're going to come in and ask you for. Now,
I will tell you that if when I'm surveying, if you have what it says that I'm asking for, you meet the requirements. Okay. But you're the facility that has to live through this disaster. And if you write the minimalist stuff that it takes to meet the state's requirements, when the disaster hits, your people and your patients are not going to fare as well as people that have prepared. So I ask you to maybe go a little farther than the simple parts of meeting this requirement for the survey procedures. But this is how you do it, okay? If you've never used a SOM, it's wonderful, and you're probably going to think to yourself, how was I doing this all along without this? Okay. This is the requirements for the state for Article 10, and it's pretty simple. It says you have to have a disaster plan that's reviewed every 12 months, and you have to have an evacuation drill on each shift at least once every 12 months, okay? And there's a few other things there, but those are the pretty big ones, okay? If you go to the National Fire Protection Association and look at it for help, because there's places where it implies that they can help you. It's really not going to help you much. It's an FPA 13, but it's mostly for community risk assessment people, which is not really how you're involved. Okay. The DHS website and DEMA's website, like I said, have help. This is DHS's. And actually he's pretty good. Got some stuff in there that's useful for you. And we'll be adding lots more to it as we go along here. But right now there's some pretty good stuff that helps you. And understand that CMS's requirements for EP is relatively new. It came out in 2017. So we're in our 5th year. This is a baby program from CMS. So we're all just struggling to catch up right now, and we understand that when we're surveying. Okay, and then like I said, DEMA's website is right there, and you just go to the emergency management section. You'll find all the rules, and you'll find lots of help, and that's their job, is to jump in and help. And let's see, FEMA offers a lot of training, and it's free. If you go to their website, you definitely want to take Introduction to Incident Command and Introduction to the National Incident Management System. Those are critical if you want to be able to do this, because you won't understand what they're asking you to do if you don't have those two systems. There are 2 local ones here. So I know there's some of you out there that are kind of like this stuff. Maybe not too many of you, but some of you. And if that's the case, they offer G300 and G400 on the DEMA website. You can get those classes. They're also free, but they're a week long. And they're going to take you into these classes and mix you with people like firefighters, incident commanders, police officers, road people, prisons people, people from the medical world. And you're all going to sit down and you're going to work out problems, and you're going to manage emergencies. So that one is very helpful to you. I think there's also many more on there. In addition, FEMA, on that same website, it will lead you to a drill section, and in there they will tell you how to do drills. They'll actually just give you the whole drill written out, and you just kind of fill in the blanks with the information from your facility or facilities, if you're going to do it as a bunch. So there's also training available from Department of Human and Health Services, and CMS, that you all know, offers QSEP, and that's qsep.cms.gov. And in there, that's where they train the surveyors. So you can go in and take that same training, and it's stuff that stays on your record forever. You have it. And then as of last year in February, they realized that everybody was struggling a lot. And so they created something called Ask for Training, Ask for Tracy, okay? ASPR is the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. And Tracy is the Technical Resource Assistance Center and Information Exchange. They're going to be unbelievably helpful. They take the information from FEMA and they turn it into medical information that is useful to you. They are people that understand that you don't know how to do this, and it just says right on their website, want to know how to do your EP? Go here. We'll tell you how to do it. So I really, really believe that Ask for Tracy is going to be one of the greatest resources out there for you guys. Okay. And just let's see. Let's see. There's some other resources. Okay. ASHare is out there. So ASHare is the initial requirements from CMS said you had to have collaboration with state, local, tribal, all government agencies and other facilities, and basically anybody that can help you, okay? And they found that that wasn't very easy to do, especially early on when no one understood what you were trying to do. So they funded, and it comes through the Department of Health, but they funded ASHare. And that's where they get their funding. That's why they don't charge you to join. You really need that. In a minute, I'm going to tell you why, but there are others. So the Health Systems Alliance of Arizona is also planning to do it, but they're not quite there yet. That portion of their website is not done yet. So ASHare is what you have at the moment. And understand they're not consultants. They help you collaborate. Okay. Just like even what we're doing here, I'm not consulting, I'm teaching. So there's a little bit of difference. The consulting is very personal. So they're going to help you with your community-based risk assessments. They're going to help you with phone numbers. They're going to help you get your drills in. They're going to help you with quite a few things. So great resource. That either one, I don't really care. Like I said, ASHare is the only real good one right now that's up and running strong. The other one is going to have it, but it's not there yet. But you can do it through Maricopa County. You can do it through the county that you're in. And that's allowed as long as you have collaboration. If you wanted to, you could go so far as to, call all these people and make contracts with them all yourself. If you don't know how ASHare works, basically they have you join, you sign a contract saying that you're going to join this collaboration and that you'll support it, kind of like NATO. And so you don't have to have all these contracts with all these agencies. It provides them for you, okay? So Department of Homeland Security, so they want you to identify in your hazardous vulnerability assessment threats or hazards that are classified as probable, and those hazards that can cause severe property injury, property damage, business disruption, or environmental impacts. Okay, so we're going to talk about this pretty extensively in a minute. But when you're identifying these, you can go pretty deep. Like as I say, you can nuclearize this if you want, but you don't really have to. You just have to hit the things that hit those big items we were just talking about. Okay. Another thing they talk about a lot is something called the all hazards approach. And when I'm out surveying, and I do probably 15, 20 facilities a month. I get asked this question, I would say 13 out of 15. what does all hazards approach mean? Okay. And I can explain it the way it says it on here to you, and it won't help a lot. But the way that I kind of explain it so it makes sense to people, when you call 911 and they send somebody out, if they can't deal with the issue, there ain't no 912. And what that means is they got to bring everything that they need to your emergency to deal with it, because they're responsible for it. Now, imagine a police car. How big is a police car? How big is a fire truck? How are they able to deal with our emergency? So what they do is they track the kind of calls that they run, okay? And they make notes, and they do after action reports themselves. And they figure out the type of calls they run, and the ones they run the most that require the most equipment is the equipment they buy and they put on those trucks. And then they create backup trucks that sit back at the station with the real specialized stuff that they hardly ever do, like rappelling off mountains and hazardous materials and stuff. And they'll call those out. But essentially what that's saying is you don't have to have something for everything that you identify. You pick the things that are the worst and you buy things that'll work for it and probably the other stuff too, if that makes sense. Okay. Getting through these quick, that's good. So the CMS process, and this is a process, and you have to do it step by step. If you try skipping the e-tags, it doesn't work, because what CMS did is they set this up so that you would have a master's degree in emergency planning. At least everybody would think you would, because it's the same steps that somebody that has a degree would take to come up with the answers. Okay, so you have to follow step by step. Like the first thing you have to do is you have to go out and identify all the hazards that you're going to try to deal with. So you set up these vulnerability assessments and you figure them out, and you make the ones that are priorities, and you make you eliminate the ones that can't apply to you, so that you know the things that you're going to have to write a policy for. Okay. And then the next thing you do is they have you identify your patients. Who are your patients? Are these people in wheelchairs? Are these people in gurneys? Are these people walking in? Are these people on ventilators? Because when you write a policy for how to take care of those patients during these types of emergency, you need to know who those patients are. So you got to follow their steps right along. Otherwise, it won't work. Okay. And the same thing when they're talking about who's in command and all that stuff, that all is needed to generate these policies. Okay. Read the Psalm fairly well when you're doing it. Because of people's backgrounds, and like I was talking, we tend to stop reading about halfway through and think, oh, I got this. And there's a fairly decent chance that unless you've been on a FEMA team or you have a master's degree in emergency planning, you don't got it. So you really need to read what it's asking you to do and put that, answer the question, what they want, and think about it. Get literal with federal government documents, and don't add to them, because you don't have to. Now, you can make your program better. I'm not telling you to not do that. I'm just saying, don't add to the requirements for yourself from what they ask. Okay, follow the requirements. Make it count, make it useful, think about it. Look up things on the internet, ask people. We all are here to share when it comes to EP. This is not, we're in competition with them. If there's another dialysis place down the street, please know who they are and their emergency preparedness person and talk to them. You guys should be working together. Even though you have corporate plans, you have to all get out of there. You have to live through this. So the other thing that's so important, everybody loves to go out and get words off the internet and then just copy and paste them into their plan. Okay, and I call those blah, blah, blah. that to me is, I'm about to panic when I open this plan up and there's an emergency going on and there's 2 pages of blah, 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 useless information. Okay. I need the stuff that's going to get me out of this building that's on fire. Okay. I need to know where I'm going to stage. I need to know this important stuff. I don't add all this extra stuff because people aren't going to read it. They'll take your plan and they'll just throw it down, and that'll be that. Okay. They'll fend for themselves, and they'll probably in the middle of an emergency, because they don't have the training, they'll just panic, and then chaos will ensue. And any firefighter can tell you what happens when places go into chaos. Okay. The next thing about these, I can't do this for you. If I could, you can ask my boss, she'll tell you. I'd give you all the plans and say, here you are, this is perfect. Okay. And I would love to do that for you, and so would CMS. But we can't. Your facility is very unique. It's got things in different places. It's got different language that you guys use. You know, I say risk assessment, you call it a hazardous vulnerability assessment. I say emergency preparedness, you say disaster plan. It has to be custom to your facility so that the people know what you're saying to them. And, you know, you're going to describe where they're going to evacuate to. That's very custom to your facility. You're going to tell things here in a minute about what to do if someone refuses to evacuate. That's custom to your facility. That's policies coming from your management. I can't tell you what to do when that happens. And I can't tell you how to shut down your HVAC system. You need to know how to do that. So they're very custom to you, okay? So they're not generic. The other thing that's really important to know is these plans, when you write them, they apply to everybody in that facility. So, you know, a lot of what's been going on in the past, CMS is aware and we're aware, is these drills come down and then the emergency preparedness coordinator runs the drill from their phone in their office. And then we get there and the people, when we go to survey them, they don't know what they're doing. Okay. And in this new revision that came out of the SOM, it's telling us in there to do this emergency preparedness survey with one of the frontline employees. Don't pick the emergency preparedness person. Go right to the front line, go to the nurse's desk, go to the front desk, go wherever you want and say, all right, I want this person to come in and do the survey with me. We haven't done that yet because we haven't found a facility that was even close to ready for that. So it would have been a disaster, but I'm telling you, they're going to want that, and they're already wanting it, and we're going to start doing that. They're also telling us that we can walk in and ask you to pull a drill. We also haven't done that yet because we don't think people are quite ready for that yet. They didn't really understand the SOM yet and know that requirement. So I'm getting it out there so that everybody's well aware that can happen. And I will tell you, FEMA does it all the time to the nuclear generating station. They just walk in the door and pull a drill. And they have our emergency preparedness people do it. And so this is coming, okay? So this applies to everybody. You got to get everybody involved in these drills. You got to let them all understand, hey, this applies to you. This is a job requirement. This is one survey out of the 3. It's important, okay? And they're just not having us fold up and go home when the disaster happens in the future. Like I say, AdShare and the others, they can help, and they can help a lot. If you email them with questions and stuff, sometimes they have the answers. Certainly, Ask for Tracy's website has the answer. I can guarantee you, I couldn't find things that I couldn't get answers to from their website. It was there, okay? Share what you learned. One of the things that we're asking AdShare to do now, they haven't done it yet, but it should be up pretty shortly, because they're going to have a share page. And basically, you guys will be able to go in there and say, hey, I had a really good idea. What do you guys think of this? So I want to give you an example of that. So yesterday, my wife works, like I said, as a director of nursing here in the Valley, and the company she works for, the emergency preparedness coordinator for them, she obviously knows she's married to me, and so she ran by her and she said, as shares getting ready to have a drill, and the best I can tell, it says that we got to come up with it. So my wife read it, and it said it was going to be a major loss of power outage, statewide one. And so she called her back, and the lady said, well, what's your plans? And my wife, she said the stuff I expected. She said, we're not going to start surgeries and all the stuff that is standard stuff that you would do. But then she impressed me a lot, and I know she's been listening, and I hope you guys are. She said, I would make a phone call to the local police department in Ashshare, and I would advise them that we have a generator and our facility is empty because we stopped surgeries, and we can take patients from dialysis facilities that don't have generators. We can take at-home patients that don't have generators. We can take patients that are on oxygen generators that don't have electricity, and we can take hospice patients that don't have electricity, and we can house them here until we get electricity back. And I said, you know what, babe, you get it. This is exactly what this is about. Okay, and that should be in everybody's. And I can tell you, if when you go to Ashshare's or Asper's website, they're going to ask you to sign up for updates. And when you do that, about every quarter, they're going to send you stuff that they're talking about and what is probably going to come out in the next set of rules. Right now, they're talking about what can your facility do for the community for a large-scale disaster. And they want that in your plan. They haven't written it as a rule yet, but that's coming, okay? So they're talking about it a lot. So this is where the share part comes in. If we come up with things like that, we want to share, okay, and get that out to everybody. This is not about competition. Keep it up to date. So phone numbers change regularly. In addition, when you're doing these drills, pick up those phone books and call some of those phone numbers to make sure they work, okay? If you have a generator, make sure that you have the ability to get fuel. Call the fuel company. Make sure that their phone number works and that they can deliver fuel to you. Your suppliers, make sure your suppliers' phone numbers works.
Hey, Kevin, I have a question.
Okay.
Is there any downside to coordinating with someone outside of your network for emergency preparedness planning? Are there any regulatory barriers?
No. And that's a great question. No, I actually think it's fantastic to do so. And I'll give you an example. When the requirement comes, and it's a matter of when, and it says that you're going to have a plan for surge for your community base, for your community disasters, what can you do? That's going to be a tough question for some people. And they ask me, what would I write? And I say, well, if you're a hospital, you're probably, you're not going to get rid of your nurses. You send them somewhere. You're going to say, hey, we need help, because they're going to all come to us. So your plan is going to have something like, well, I'll have the phone number of all of the medical facilities in my area, and I'll call them and ask them for assistance. I have agreements with them. If you're an ambulatory surgical center, you're going to say something like what my wife said, I hadn't even thought of, or something like, we're going to send all of our nurses to the hospital to help, or we're going to send them out on the highway at that tent that the National Guard set up to deal with the bomb that went off at the stadium. And I know this comes up a lot. What about the people that are not medical people? Well, can you run your medical facility without those people? And the same is true about out on the side of the highway for a mass casualty. They need people that are runners, people that do the paperwork, people that direct traffic, people that sit with the patients. So absolutely be involved. If you're in these smaller towns, they have emergency coordinators in those towns. Tell those people who you are and that you're writing this plan so that they can send you help or they can call you for help. The same with the hospital. This is not the way we've thought about it in the past. We have to think about this differently. We have to think about working together. Okay. This is a national system here. So I think
Kevin,
that
it looks like we have a hand up, Lila Matthew.
okay.
I'm going to go ahead and unmute Lila and see what she has to say. Lila, you should be
Yeah, I see.
unmuted.
What I was saying is we already participate with the local facilities
Yes.
that we can take, and we also do the top drill, or we
Yes.
share our programs with others so that we can be more effective in the community. Like when there is power outrage or our water system goes down, we ask others, can we bring our patients as a third shift and run the hemodialysis?
Yes.
So we are used to this for a while, and we also arrange some of the hotel rooms for our home patients when the power goes out in their area.
Yeah, and I would bet you say if you were to talk to those hotel people and get them on board with PD and other things, those rooms would all be reserved in an emergency for you. You'd have a contract with them.
Yes.
And so, yes, you are exactly right on the money, exactly the way this thing works.
Thank you.
And understand, there's large scale plans in place right now. There's a lot of concern about California and a large scale earthquake in dialysis patients.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a lot of tracking going on right now and a lot of planning on where they're going to set those, where they're going to send those patients, where they're going to set those hemodialysis systems up. And alternate care sites obviously are part of your plan, but that's wherever they tell you to go. So, you're probably going to be a big part of this. So
yeah,
I applaud you for doing that.
Yeah, and also when the survey people came, they did ask for our emergency preparedness binder, and they wanted us to explain exactly what are the type of emergencies common in Arizona and what would you do.
Yes, we're going to talk about that in a minute, how you come up to that answer.
Okay.
Sounds like you've came up with the answer, but I'm going to show the people that don't know here in a minute how to do that.
Okay, thank you.
All righty.
Thanks. Kevin, do you want to move on to our first poll question?
Sure, yes. I kind of didn't.
All right. I think it might be a good time. So the question is, and I think I'm going to hit launch on this. Oh, yep. Jesse did it for me. In order for your drill to count towards your EP, what are the required elements? And this is multiple choice. You can use your plan and write an after action report. Facilities must submit drills to DHS and receive approval in advance. Every employee must participate. Or drills must be video recorded and posted to the facility's website. So we'll give you about a minute here to answer this. We encourage participation. There's no penalties for wrong answers. All right, it looks like we're leading with you have to use your plan and write an after action, followed fairly closely by every employee must participate. About another 30 seconds here. All right, looks like we have a winner. Use your plan and write an after action report. All right, Kevin, you want to talk about each of those for us?
Yes, so, all right. Okay, I can see those results now. That looks great. So it looks like if you have a real call, you have to use your plan. Because a lot of people, it's funny, we trained this, we did this stuff, in the fire department too. We'll train like crazy this way. And then when the real thing happens, we do it the way we've always done it. okay? And that's real easy in the medical world right now because EP is fairly new. And so you've got all these medical people out there that have been in this business for 30, 40 years, and they didn't use a plan, okay? So they don't go to it, they go to something else. If that happens and you don't use your plan, then you can't count it as a drill, even if it's a real call. Now, at any point here, mind you, someone can step in and say, hey, we need to start using the plan because we didn't start out right. And they open the book and they go, oh man, glad we looked because this was thought of, okay? So use that plan. The after action reports, they're really simple. They got to have 4 things, and it makes a lot of sense. You got to write down what happened, what should have happened, what did you learn, and what did you do with what you learned. So hopefully you added it to your plan, and you went on the AdShare page and told them all about it so that somebody else could learn from it without having the mistake. Okay. It's interesting that the second thing was every employee must participate. In the 2021 revision that just came out, they want every employee in a facility to participate in a drill at least once every 2 years. And so they don't really give guidance to what happens if, so happened that this one person happened to be off both the days you were having your drills. And when that happens at Palo Verde, what we had to do was we had to go take the after action report and have a meeting with them afterwards and go over everything in the after action report. But this is something we're going to be checking on in 2 years. 2 years from last April, we're going to be checking that every single employee that works there has participated in at least one drill and is documented, or at least reviewed the after action report and has been documented. So good job, everybody. That's real close. And the one that got second is very close to being accurate. So very good. Let's see. Train and drill. Your patients and the community are counting on you. Big time. Your patients are so counting on you to get this right. Because we walk in some facility and those patients are very sick patients. And I've had some conversations we're going to talk about in life safety in a minute. But there's some feelings, they can just unconnect themselves from the machine and get up and get out of there. And we all know that that's not necessarily the case. So we're counting on you to even if you don't use your patients in the drills, and certainly if you can use your patients, I know my wife, she always says, well, patients don't care about my drills and they don't want to be involved and all that. I'm telling you from a patient's perspective, I don't mind participating at all because I want the facility that I'm at to show that they know what they're doing, and I get to see whether they know what they're doing. So I don't mind helping you at all train. So this is important. And my son said, the Army says, fight as you train, train as you fight. And that's definitely the motto in the fire department too. So if you're running your drills with the EP coordinator, and the EP coordinator is not there the day that the emergency happens, guess what? Your situation ain't going to go well because you just lost the fight because you didn't train anybody in the facility. You only trained that person to write it. And then the next thing, make it useful for all situations. Just remember that in the fire department, the police department, other things, they don't have emergency procedures. So whenever you can, do it the way you always do it. When you write your plans, write them with the terminology and the methods that you use all the time so that it's second nature to people to do it that way, okay? And it may change some of the ways that you do things. I don't really know. Dialysis is not something that I do most of the time, but let's just say that you exit people out multiple different areas, but maybe the place where you're going to stage everybody when you evacuate is out this door. Maybe start using that door as your normal door that you use, or at least set your set your place that you're going to stage in an area where it's outside the door that you always do use, so that people don't think, oh, a different door, which door? Okay, simple things like that. Put them in your plan that way, so they're very well thought out. And if you drill with all of your employees, they're going to tell you this stuff. When they try to do the drill, it's not going to work right if it's not that way, or they're going to say it would sure work better if we didn't have to take them through all that water and all those chemicals back there, or whatever, you know. And then the last thing that's real important, CMS says you have to have a plan. They don't tell you exactly what has to be in it, mostly, just very few things. And that's kind of what I'm telling you. This is your plan. And when I say yours, I mean all of you. This really should be all. If we could write an integrated plan, we certainly would. Okay. CMS takes emergency preparedness seriously, very seriously. It's one of the 3 surveys. Go ahead, Odette. Did you have something? Oh, never mind.
No, that's what we just did.
Okay. There are 4 parts to your emergency preparedness plan. Okay. Because this gets confusing to people. But your ETAG 3 and your ETAG 4, and both those apply to you. They're confusing. One says you have to have an emergency preparedness program, and then the next one says you have to have an emergency preparedness plan. Okay. And the emergency preparedness program, if you look what the surveyor is going to ask, and we're going to talk about it in a second, but I'll hit on it a little bit now. They're just going to come in and ask you to explain your program. Just tell us what you did to create this thing. You know, what's it all about? And then they're going to want a policy saying we will have an emergency preparedness program, and it's going to have an emergency preparedness plan. It's going to have a communications plan. It's going to have policies and procedures, and it's going to have a plan for training and testing. Okay. And it really is that simple. It's not that much greater than that for that very first one. Okay. And then the second one.
Wait, Kevin, it looks like we have a question or a hand raised from Laura Sadler.
Okay.
I'm gonna, Laura, you should be able to talk.
Laura, you there? Well, doesn't sound like it.
Hold on, let me just make sure. Laura, can you unmute yourself? It looks like I gave you permission. You should be good. Oh, no question. Her internet's going in and out. Okay, sorry. Thank you. All right, we'll see if we can get that fixed, Laura. Sorry. Thanks,
Okay,
Kevin.
perfect. So in your plan, you're gonna want to make sure that it complies with federal, state, and local laws. That's why I showed you the rest of them. I know you're thinking CMS only, but you have to be in compliance with state law, and you have to be in compliance with the local law of the land. If you're on a federal institution or a federal land like a reservation, you got to be in compliance with their laws. CMS is checking that also. Okay, and you got to identify all the hazards, and that was pointed out to me a minute ago. And your plan has to address all the care-related emergencies that might happen to you. So in dialysis, I'm sure being out of water would be way more critical than most places. You got to have equipment and power failures, interrupted in communications, including cyber attacks. And you got to address things like I lost a portion of the building, or I lost all or a portion of my supplies. Okay, and you got to review that plan and update it at least every 2 years. Okay, you have to have a communications plan. Also has to comply with all those laws. And you have to have the ability to communicate with your patients, the staff, all your physicians, and you have to have the ability you have to coordinate with other healthcare facilities, okay? And the health department. And we're going to talk about the health department's role in a minute and how they played quite a role in COVID-19. So, and then you have to have policies and procedures. If you identify something as a hazardous as a hazard in your vulnerability assessment or your risk assessment plan, you have to write a policy or procedure for that, okay? Because you identify it as something that could happen to you. And that procedure also has to be in compliance with federal, state, and local law, okay? And then you have to have a policy for testing and training, and it has to comply with the law, and it has to be updated every 2 years also. And we're going to go into these way more in depth here in a second, okay? So these are the tags that are most identified, okay? When we're writing citations. That probably the thing that happens the most is people don't get their training or their drills in. And contrary to popular belief, CMS did not waive any requirements due to COVID-19. Those requirements are still there, okay? So you still have to test and train. There are some ways that you can do it a little differently right now, but you still have to do it. So, and then those risk assessments, you have to have a community-based risk assessment. That means you have to go outside of your organization, either the county or AdShare, or there's some private ones, Kaiser Permanente. There's a multitude of them. Your consultant you get may have one, but you have to go outside and figure out all of the kind of hazards that exist in your area or in your state or in the country, okay? And then you take those and you make them your own. You go, oh, these are the ones that could affect us, okay? If you don't do that correctly, you will also get cited for development of policies and procedures, because the surveyor is going to want to know, well, how did you write policies and procedures when you didn't even know what the hazards were? Okay. Or if you didn't write policies and procedures on all your hazards, then they'll cite you for 13 also. Okay. Procedures for sheltering in place. I see it all the time, but it's woefully inadequate. It just doesn't address anything hardly. It's just somebody went on the internet and said a few basic things, and it just doesn't cover anything. Okay. 5, volunteers and staffing. So CMS has a different term for volunteers, and that's the main reason I brought this up. Volunteers can be non-medical volunteers, and certainly I hear all the time we don't use volunteers. Well, you do, and you would, because you're not evacuating your patients with an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car, probably, in a large scale emergency. So you're going to be using those volunteers, directing traffic, waving the fire department in, sitting with your patients when you have to put them in an area where the staff can't see them. There's a multitude, and that could be even their family, but they're volunteers now. So you might want a few rules about that, who can be a volunteer and what little rules you got for volunteers. But mostly CMS says volunteers are medical people that are sent to you by the federal government, or in some cases, the state government, to come in and assist you. And that, we saw recently in Sierra Vista, where the federal government sent in doctors and nurses to help that hospital with staffing because they were being overwhelmed. And we've seen recently where the senators from Arizona were requesting that the National Guard be activated to assist in the rural areas due to low staffing. If you bring them in there and then you spend 5 days credentialing them, then they're not very helpful. They're not even a good volunteer. The ones that get sent to you from the federal government or the state government, they're licensed in your state or in all 50 states, okay? You might also address things like the nursing compact and address the states. If they're licensed in that state, they're licensed, okay? And they got rules for physicians, and they got rules. So that's what they're talking about, volunteers, if these people come in, okay? You have to have a communications plan, and it's the policy that gets everybody in trouble. They'll have everything else, but they won't have a policy for what has to be in there. The emergency officials' contact information. We're going to address that pretty heavily in a minute, but there are 4 that have got to be there. And if they're not there, then you'll get cited for it. And that's FEMA, that's ASPR, which is the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Readiness. Yeah. And Department of Homeland Security. Security, yeah. Yes.
Wait, Kevin, could you repeat that?
So you got FEMA, ASPR, DHS, which Department of Homeland Security, and then CMS.
And these are all numbers that are required to be in the plan or at the facility, or where do they have to have them?
They have to have those in their communications plan. And that's the emergency officials contact information has to be there.
Got it.
And we're gonna ask for those 4 every time.
Got it. Thank you.
So and then you have to have your training documents, and that's a policy that says, you know, when do you train? You know, who gets trained? How often do they get trained? And then down at the bottom, there's one that it's the nice, most popular, but emergency preparedness patient population. And what happens there is people don't identify who their patients are. And then when they write their plans, they don't have plans in there for the type of patients they have. Okay. Now you don't have to tell us, there are some requirements for ESRD and ASCs that are not required. Like you don't have to tell us all the plans you have in place for the patients that have risk. So you don't have to tell us that you have a defibrillator because you have patients that are cardiac compromised. Okay. But you do have to tell us the kind of patients you have. And I will tell you that's things like, are they on a gurney? Are they going to need oxygen? You know, if your facilities in these remote areas and you're on the side of a mountain and you're writing an evacuation policy and your patients are on a gurney, tell me how that works. Because when you evacuate them, if you don't have a bunch of volunteers, your gurneys are going to roll down the hill. And you don't have enough nurses to take care of those patients. So you kind of have to have a plan for that, and you need to identify those patient population. Okay. Let's see here. So this is not mandatory, by the way. I've been doing a lot of facilities over the last couple of years, and everybody came up with this idea. Okay. So I'm just going to tell you about it. Use it if you want. If you don't, you're not in violation of anything. Okay. And I want to be clear about that. CMS does not require this. Okay. But it'll help you develop your plan. Okay. If you go through and list in an index at the front, all of those SOM ETAG requirements that you're required to do. So just go in there and say, oh, I'm required to do number 3, number 4, number 6, number 7, number 9, number 13, number 18, 20, and 22. And then there's a couple more, but and then just put in there the things that ETAG requires. And then when you go to do your plan, you're going to say, oh, well, this is actually pretty easy. I need to have a policy or program description in the first one. Easy, right? In the second one, I need to have an E-plan description, and I need to have an annual or biannual review. Okay. In the third one, I need to do community-based risk assessment and facility-based. If I don't have both of those, the surveyor is going to come in and I don't have what is necessary. But in addition, if you have this in your book, when the surveyor walks in and you go, I don't have enough staff, here's my book, the surveyor can do it without you. It's that easy. In addition, your staff, when they go to find something, when they go to these policies and procedures, if they're laid out with tabs, it's really easy to find them. Okay. You can do it if you want. I just give you this as an option. Okay. So there's all of the things that each one of them requires. All right. So let's start off with ETAG 3. And this, Odette, is probably a great spot for that break we were going to have at 10:30.
Okay, I think that sounds like a great idea, unless anybody has any objections. We were going to have a 10-minute break. Can we regroup at 10:30 instead of 10:40?
That'd be great with me.
All right, hearing no objections, I think let's go ahead and break, and we'll see everybody back at 10:30. Thanks, Kevin.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Okay, it looks like it's 10:30 on the dot and we are back. I see a few questions in the Q&A. I'll get those answered right away. And Kevin, I think we're ready for you. Do you want to share your screen again, or you want us to do it?
Yeah, if you can do it, that's awesome.
All right, let me see what I can do here. Great, thanks, Jesse.
Did you get me back yet?
Yep, I think we are on slide right down there, 33 maybe?
36.
36?
Yeah.
There we go. All right, thanks, Jesse.
All right, that's probably not going to work. You know why? Because I can't move the screen.
You want us to do it?
Yeah, you can unshare and I'll just go back. I'll just find share on mine and put it back up there.
Or you can just tell me when to skip to the next slide if you want.
Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
All right, so the first one, ETAG 3. What goes here? So if you look at the SOM, it tells you that the surveyor is going to ask for two things. They're going to ask for a policy or procedure, and we use those words. It could be any other word you like. Also, it doesn't have to be policy or procedure, but something similar, something that makes the rules for your facility. And you need to have one for your program. Okay, so I slapped together a real simple example here of what we're talking about here, and went in there and looked at the SOM and said, well, these are the things they want. So we're gonna XYZ ESRD is gonna have a community-based risk assessment. We're gonna use the all hands approach. We're gonna have an emergency plan, which is gonna include a hazardous vulnerability assessment, and we're gonna address fires and equipment failures and power failures, basically all the things that you're going to address, that simple stuff. We're going to have a communications plan. We're going to have a training and testing program that makes sure that it addresses and that we know we're good at what we're doing, okay? And we're going to be in compliance with all the requirements in CMS's State Operations Manual Appendix Z, okay? Next. Okay. The other thing it's going to do on ETAG 3 is we're going to ask you specifically. I thought that was in there. You know what? We're going to have to go back and let me do that because it feels weird to me. All right, let's see. Share screen. There we go. All right, that makes it. Anyways, the other thing it's going to ask you for is you have to tell us about your program. In addition to having a policy. So I tell people, you know what, write that down. Because if I'm addressing people that wrote the plan, 1 out of 10 can describe it to me in words. And even then they miss all kinds of stuff. And if we're going to start surveying your frontline employees, they're really not going to know what your plan's all about. So just write down, this is what our plan's all about. And you could read the policy. That'd be fine too. I wouldn't care. Because if you identify it well in your policy, you're going to make a policy probably, if I know policy guys, this, they can turn this into 10 pages. And that's a lot to read. But if you can keep it this simple, that's fine with me. ETAG 4, an emergency plan. This is a policy again. This is the emergency plan policy, and you're going to say we're going to look at all these things, okay? We've talked about them all. We're going to talk a lot more about them. We're going to talk about the things that are required and things that are not required. You should address all that, but that's what ETAG 4 is all about. Okay, so that's pretty easy. There's what the facility is going to ask for, or the surveyor, sorry. Basically just what I said is in your policy, right? And you're going to make sure that you update it every 2 years. By the way, I don't care, and nor does CMS. A couple things, they're very clear about this. They don't care whether you update the entire plan at the front of it, and you have a date that you reviewed the whole thing, or you can update sections of it and date those sections. But we have to be able to see that you're doing everything at least every 2 years. Okay. CMS is also very clear that your plan can be digital or hard copy. All I'll say is there's more to come on this, but when you evacuate the facility or you have a cyber attack, if you're digital, you're blind. So if you want to keep the master plan with the dates on it and stuff on the computer, to do that, but make sure there's at least a printed copy in the facility for the staff to use if they have to evacuate, or like I said, they lose all power or communications. But it's really that easy for ETAG 4. Let's see, ETAG 6. So ETAG 6, the first thing in this, you get lots of debate on this one, but you have to have a community-based risk assessment. And ASHARE will give you one, and the way they do theirs is every couple of years they send out a survey to all participating medical facilities in the state, and they tell us what kind of things exist in your area, what kind of emergencies, what kind of disasters. And everybody responds back, and then they put that in a big plan, and you guys use it to say, oh, these are the kind of disasters in our area. Okay, so they do theirs. Maricopa County puts out one. What they do is they get a hold of all the fire departments and police departments and all the calls that have been run in the county and the things the state runs, and they put together a list of all the disasters that they know of that have happened in the county. And you can certainly use that one. I've not seen anybody use theirs yet, but you can, and I've assessed it from their webpage. The city of Phoenix and all the others have decided to turn theirs over to Maricopa County, and so they just feed information in there. Okay, you can also use any of the consultants that are out there, such as Kaiser Permanente, and I use their name in their program because I see so many people do use it, because it'll do their facility, it'll do their community-based one, and then it asks, do you want us to do your facility-based one? And you say yes, and it fills out that with your help. The only downside I see from the Kaiser Permanente one is it's national. So I see people with their, this is where they get cited in 13 for not having plans for all the things they identified. You know, it has hurricanes, it has everything that's national, and they'll end up letting that stuff bleed over into their facility-based one. And then they're like, oh, I don't need to write a plan. We don't have hurricanes here. But then I come in and I go, well, hey, but you said you do, and you didn't write a plan. Now, I'm not a ruthless person that just writes up everything I can. So obviously I got a brain, and I know that you don't have hurricanes. So if you don't write a policy for hurricane, I'm not going to cite you for that. But I don't survey ESRD, so I don't know what'll happen with you guys. But create a facility-based risk assessment, okay? Like I said, if you don't have both of those, you won't get number 13 also for procedures and policies. Two things are absolutely required no matter what CMS lists them, and that's emerging infectious diseases, EIDs. And then the other that they require, no matter what, is extreme temperatures. Both of those have to be in your facility-based assessment. I'm going to give you a few others that are just blatantly obvious to me that you all have them. Okay. Everybody should have fire. It might just be internal if you live in a city, or it could be internal and external if you live in the forest or have a lot of buildings next to you. Okay. You want to list cyber attacks. I'm not telling you, CMS doesn't say you have to. This is me telling you this. It's not because it would minimize the effect on your facility, although it might, and you might be addressing this in your HIPAA, but there are literally 30 people that you have to contact within a very short amount of time, or they start assessing fines to your facility for not notifying the government that you've had a security breach. There's a long list, and so you want to get all of that stuff listed in your plan so you can start making those notifications and do it in a timely fashion. It's going to be very difficult if you haven't written a plan and it takes you 10 days to figure out you got to start notifying people. It's real hard to not put in their active shooter. That's pretty much a problem everywhere. Equipment and power failures are everywhere, and then care-related emergencies. Okay, and so I'll show you some of the simple things you can put, but you can do it how you want. But you got to have EIDs and you got to have temperature extremes. Okay. So what is a hazardous vulnerability assessment? It's a tool to help you evaluate the specific hazards that your facility might encounter. Okay. And you use categories when you make this thing. And I'm going to give you an example here in a minute. But you want to figure out the probability of it happening. You know, if it's a meteor, although we all agree that that could happen to any facility in America, it doesn't have a very high probability. Therefore, you're probably not going to write an assessment on it, or you write a policy on it. Okay. Human impact. If it doesn't affect people, you know, you wouldn't really write a policy for roaches because now I know some people will say it affects them dramatically, but if they were to infiltrate you, it wouldn't critically cause you a problem right off the bat. Property and business impact. So if it's going to impact your business dramatically, you see CMS and the Department of Health both need your facilities to exist. You provide critical infrastructure for the citizens of this country and state. And so they really want you to assess if it's going to affect your business or the property that you're on, okay? And then they want you to assess how much response is it going to require? Is it going to require, you know, one person to go over and close a vent, or is it going to require everybody in my facility to start activating, or people from the outside to start activating, or state and federal agencies to get involved? So that, and we're going to show all of this, how this comes together, but I just want to talk about it a little bit. And then you have to give it a numeric value of the relative threat. And so with CMS, they require you to give it a percentage of, you know, remember we talked about that all hazards. This is where that percentage comes in, and it says, well, this is the most likely to have, because when I added it all up, 30%, this has a 30% likelihood of happening to us, and the impact would be so bad. So I want to dedicate 30% of my resources to this one incident. Okay. You want to be able to address your vulnerabilities. You want to mitigate the hazards. You want to respond to them. You want to recover from them. And you want to be able to deal with either man-made or environmental emergencies. And you want to have a great plan for doing so. Okay. They don't care if it's naturally occurring, human occurring, or technological. You want to rate all of these vulnerabilities from 0 to 3. I am going to give an example in a minute, I promise. And then you want to look at the human impact, the property impact, the business impact. And all of these things, I believe they're either going to give you a copy of the PowerPoint or something so you can go back to this. But you want to put all of those things in there, okay? And in your preparedness, you want to have, and all this because CMS is requiring most of this, but you want to have alternate sources and supplies. You want to have a memorandum of agreement. You want to have your insurance information in there. If you're evacuating and your insurance information is in the building, not going to help too much. And you want to have your pre-plans, and you want to have your internal responses, external responses. You can use checklists. You can use Excel spreadsheets. You can use anything you want. If you go to Ask for Tracy, there's an actual link right there, but you'll find it pretty easy when you get there. It'll show you some of these ways things you can use, okay? I'm going to show you one here in a minute too. Do your HVA at least once a year. The things with the highest scores get the highest risk. Utilize the data in your HVA to decide what you're going to write policies on. So when I say that, maybe you're going to nuclearize this and you're going to say, well, this facility does have roaches. Well, when you get all done doing this probability impact scoring, you're going to find out it has a really low number. And so although it does exist, it doesn't have a high enough number that you need to write a policy for your employees to use if you're overrun by roaches. And I just want to throw this added note in from the surveyor. And I'm not making fun of anybody or in their beliefs or anything else, but zombies don't exist. Okay, and I see them all the time in the HVA, and it immediately gives me a sense of who I'm dealing with. And it's hard to get rid of that sense. So it doesn't make me laugh because this stuff is, as you can see, I'm a little passionate about it. So if you're going to put it in there, it's not going to make you have to write a policy score. So at least don't write a policy for it. You have to have a percentage. 0 to 100 is the total. 100 is the total score. Everything that you have that you've identified. Most places I see come up with about 10. In Arizona, there are obviously can be more or less depending on where you live. And some things are 20%, some things are 2%. So you just have to do that. So here's one that I made. And it is not a requirement for you to do it this way. Okay. So if you take emerging infectious diseases, you got to have it. You got to have extreme weather, no matter what. You take the probability likeliness of this occurring. Can we all say, right now it's a 3, but before COVID, you might have said 2 or even 1. We all know it can happen. Probability of death or injury from one of those, pretty high. Interruption of service, we all know it closed us down, didn't it, for a while there. Physical loss or damage to the facility, that's your opinion, so probably not a lot. Likelihood of need for assistance, absolutely. We needed a ton of help. Amount of pre-planning, now we're doing a ton on it. Prior to that, we weren't hardly doing any, but it does require some pre-planning for emerging infectious diseases. When you write your policy for emerging infectious diseases, you're going to address COVID, obviously, and you're going to address Ebola, SARS. If you go into the SOM, it just lists them all out. But one of them that's interesting, I find, is the one that hasn't been identified yet, which was COVID, 2 or 3 years ago, at least COVID-19. And so when you give all of these a score of 0 to 3, when you get to the end, you're going to get a number. It's not going to work out as your percentage number, by the way. Tried that. It just won't. But you'll give it a number, and then after you get all of your things in there, and I listed a whole bunch over here on the side, and I think I just did this thing in Word. It's really easy to do. You should be able to create one of your own, okay? When we come in, we're going to ask to see written documentation of the risk assessment and associated strategies. So that's going to be your policies and procedures in a minute. We're going to interview the leadership. It asks which hazards were included and why you included them. Okay. It's interesting to note, CMS doesn't want me to judge you on your whys. They just want to make sure that you have whys. So if your why was, well, I don't like roaches, so I put it in my thing, that's okay. I can accept that. But if you don't have a why, you put it in there, I don't know, then that might be an issue. We might have to talk, okay? And then we want to make sure that you absolutely put EIDs, and you have extreme temperatures. No matter what, you have to have them. If they're not there, you won't get this one. And I probably am citing 9 out of 10 facilities right now for no policy or procedure for EID. So please get EID in there. Please get extreme temperature in there. So like I said, we're not going to judge you. How or why, just make sure that you use some kind of logic for why you identified things. And I know that, you know, a lot of people that are on here are from corporations, and you're using integrated plans. CMS is very clear. You know, I'm going to walk right into the person that's a manager, and I'm going to say, so when they're creating this plan, are you involved? How involved are you? CMS is very, very, very clear that every facility that uses the EP has to be involved in the decision-making process for that facility. So I'm not likely to call your regional coordinator to see if they represented this facility, because you can't, unless you live in Tucson. You can't really judge for Tucson and speak for Tucson and say the plan's correct for me. You got to live there. You got to be in that facility. So it needs to be somebody in that facility. And, you know, based on how outside the realm of that are, would be a decision of how well I would be willing to accept it or not. Okay. And, you know, they tell me to be flexible and reasonable with people, and I think I am. So, the next one is ETAG 7. And ETAG 7 is going to address your at-risk patients. And this is the one I talked about, where it says that the word persons at risk does not apply to ASCs or ESRDs. But the rest of it does. Okay. So, and I'll tell you, like I already did, if you don't know who the patients are, how do you write a policy, excuse me, for protecting them, if you don't even know you have those patients? You know,
Kevin, we have a question in the chat. Yeah. Would you expect, this is from Stephanie Martinez, would you expect the risk assessment to be updated biannually, as the EP program has to be updated every 2 years biannually?
So it's one of the few things in the SOM that addresses annual, and it's really strange, because 2 revs ago they changed it from annual to biannual. In a few places in the SOM, they missed removing annual, and they'll put annual in one part of it and biannual in the other. And so I don't, you know, and I know most of the people that are on here are ESRD. I don't assess ESRD, so I don't know which part of that the surveyor might have read. They might read the part that says annual and ask you for annual and cite you, and you would have to defend biannual. But biannual is listed in there in that same Psalm, E-tag 4. So I would expect every 2 years.
Okay, so Stephanie, that's a really great question. And I think what we'll do here, since this is primarily an ESRD group, that's an excellent thing for us to take back to as a team here, and we will get an answer out to all of you with whether the risk assessment needs to be updated annually or every 2 years. And that way we have a consistent survey process here at the department.
Yeah, I strongly believe that it's a typo for the annual, but it's in the Psalm, so.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll take that back and let you all know. Thank you.
Okay, so like I said, you need to identify the patients you have in your facility, and you don't have to use the word at risk. So there was, they want you to identify the things that you have in the facility to deal with the things that you've identified on your patients. So if you identify that, let us use your patients are they're ambulatory patients. They walk in and they always have to be wheeled out due to the surgery they get. Maybe their eyes are covered, both of them, or something. I don't know. I'm kind of making this up as I'm going, but you wouldn't want to make sure that you have enough wheelchairs for all your patients, because that's what you might have. Okay. If you have ventilators, you're going to have to address in your plans how you're going to deal with a ventilator in the parking lot or transporting them somewhere else. Is the battery going to last long enough? Are you going to have to be able to connect to your generator outside your facility? And maybe you should, have a box out there so that you can connect, because they make portable boxes for that. I can't identify your facility stuff, but that's the thought process. I want to get, you thinking like that. So that's the first part. And like I said, you don't have to do that for ASCs and ESRDs. And although I'm telling you that you should do it, because it really is not a full plan if you don't do it, you're not in violation of your conditions of participation by not doing it. Okay. The last part applies to everybody, and this part sometimes gets a little different, gets a little difficult for people. So you have to have plans for continuing operations during an emergency. And in those plans, you have to have a succession plan. And I know all of you, any decent sized business has a succession plan, how they're, if you were talking Bureau of Medical Facilities, it would start with Odette and then go down to our team leaders and then down to us, right? And that's the normal succession plan. And it would say what our roles were and what we do there and our title. But they want you to have one for during emergencies. And it's okay to do it in the same plan if you want, in the same flow chart, or however, you can do it. I've seen it written out in policy. They'll start at the top and say incident commander, CEO has these jobs. I've seen it written and I've seen it in a flow chart. I've seen it both. They're both acceptable. They're both useful, as long as everybody knows their jobs and it's written down. And I'm going to tell you why it's important to be written down here in a minute. But you do have to have a couple things in there. You have to identify the incident commander, and you have to identify who can activate the plan. Because some things, a lot of the policies and procedures that you write for the plan are now the policies and procedures you're going to be using, as opposed to your normal policies and procedures. So it's real important that everybody understands you've just switched over to these new policies and procedures, and it was somebody that had the authority to do so. Okay, because there are some things that happen when you activate your plans, good and bad. Okay, and we're going to talk about that. The other thing that's really important and super important, I'm going to give you one example of why it's so important. So you have to have delegation of authority. And when you give somebody a job and you don't really define that job too much, normally they can walk over to you and say, hey, am I supposed to do this? Or how did you want that done? Or, you know, how much money do I have to do that? But during an emergency, you don't have that. So your delegation of authority has to be fairly descriptive. And people are always like, well, how would I possibly encompass all of the things that I don't even know might happen to this person? And what I'll tell you is put in there something that states that this incident commander has the authority to do whatever is necessary to save the lives of our patients and our staff, something like that. Our facility. Give them the authority. All right. So let me give you two examples. So when FEMA comes in and takes over management of an incident, let's call it a wildfire, let's call it a hurricane. Even before they take over, all this happens. But when they show up here in Arizona for a wildfire, they show up at the incident command post, they introduce themselves. The incident commander that's there says, they might be from the fire department that's on duty. So might say, okay, you're taking command. This is what I've done. This is what we have available. This is the stuff we have. Then very shortly, they'll get a call from the President of the United States, and they'll get a call from the governor of Arizona, and they'll say, this is the amount of authority you have, and this is the amount of money you have to spend. And they have people working under them, and they make everything they do happen within the boundaries of that authority. Okay, so that kind of gives you a little picture of that. Now, let me put it into perspective to you that are incident commanders, how it's going to affect you. So I had an incident, a facility manager tell me that she is a director of nursing for quite a few facilities, and there was an area up in the mountains that had fire going on, and they had a facility up there. And she responded up there as a responsible manager. And when she showed up, there was smoke in the area outside the building. They were coming on the news saying that the fire was about an hour away from evacuating that city. And she walked into the building, and the ventilation system had been picking up the smoke. And so there was small amounts of smoke in the facility, and staff was there, and they were getting ready to start surgery. And she made the decision to cancel the surgeries for the day and send the staff home. Okay. Simple decision from an armchair quarterback that I am. It was the right decision. No doubts about it. But what happened right after that is the fire turned and went a different direction. And the people that she works for down here in Phoenix that weren't up there and saw what she saw were very angry. She states that she was threatened with firing and told to never do something like that again. And I said, well, that wouldn't have been a problem if you would have had a delegation of authority in place. Because you would have said, okay, well, I did what the policy says to do, and if you want to change the policy, you can do that. But I did what I'm told, so I'm protected. So I hope that it kind of explains delegation of authority for you. So you might and you know, some of the bigger facilities have more depth, and I want you to understand, if you haven't taken the training yet.
I have a question from Patricia Sportsman. Patricia, I went ahead and unmuted you if you want to ask your question. Patricia says she has a question regarding having wheelchairs available for all patients. I'm wondering if she is thinking that
So I can address that.
Have one for each patient, maybe?
There is no requirement to do that at all. I'm just trying to get you thinking. Your facility would be the only authority that could decide whether you needed that or not. You could have alternate means. You could have sheets you're going to carry them out on. I just want you to think like that, so that you can address those things, so that your staff is not trying to figure it out when in the middle of a fire.
Okay, got it. So as long as they have a plan for getting everybody out, then they're okay. But
Absolutely.
And if it's wheelchairs, though, they have to have enough wheelchairs to get everybody out.
Well, yes and no. CMS is no. The right thing to do is yes. CMS says you have to identify. You have to figure out what you need. They never require you have wheelchairs.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So can they can use dialysis chairs if they have wheels on them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'd want to drill with that once in a while, make sure they fit through the doors and they can get over the threshold with them. Down the stairs.
Yeah.
If your exit door is right where the fire trucks are going to go, make sure you can get over the hoses.
Right.
Things like that. But it's very custom to you. Like I said, CMS is not going to tell you the details like that. They just don't. They may, what they did at Palo Verde after 20 years is they've told us every detail in the world, but they're not there with healthcare yet. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kevin.
Okay. So the incident command system, or Nims, as we use it now, you are required to have an incident command system. You're not required to use Nims, but I'm going to tell you, you're crazy if you don't, because it's just a matter of time before they're going to require it. You can't talk to the fire department who shows up, and you can't speak to the incident commander if you don't speak their language, because there's a lot of language things that you need to know in incident command. And that Nims training, although a foreign language to you, it's a 2-hour class on FEMA's website, and it's free, and they give it to you for life. So go take that training. When you can, if you're going to be the incident commander. And what you're going to find out, like in a hospital, if a fire breaks out, the charge nurse on the floor, or the person in charge on the floor where it happens, initially is the incident commander. Okay. They take control. If they don't take control, chaos ensues. So the person in charge has to take control immediately. And then as people show up, or as you get a hold of people, your incident command system grows as the incident grows and as people show up to support it. So when a fire truck shows up to a fire, the captain jumps off the truck, he's in command. Okay. He's using Nims, and he's in command, and he announces it on the radio. And then the next couple trucks show up, a chief shows up. Chief says, I'm taking command. And the captain says, I relinquish command to the incident commander. Okay. And as you get up, if you're a larger facility, you're going to have a few things. You're obviously going to have an incident commander, but you're probably going to have a safety officer. And you might say, well, what's that safety officer do? They're very critical in a fire because they walk around and make sure firemen, don't go in without their helmets on or their air pack. But that's that person that runs around for the incident commander and goes and gets some information that they can't get their hands on. That's that person that has a safety mind. And so when they go out there and people are not doing things the way the incident commander wants it done, they say something, and they have authority because they're the safety officer. You're going to want a PIO. You're welcome, Jesse. You're going to want a public information officer. It's critical. I'm guaranteeing the news wants to be involved. Okay, they're going to want information. Incident commander has no time to be talking to the media. None. Zero. So if you have a CEO, this is the great job for them. Okay, because they don't know day-to-day operations. Sometimes they don't even know all your staff. But that chief nurse officer, or the person that's the charge nurse in the area or on duty at that time, does know all that. They're a better incident commander. But you can run it however you want. CMS doesn't tell me to tell you who it is, so you can have whoever you want. I just know from experience that The CEO is a great PIO. They have a lot of authority and they can speak for the facility. They also have a lot more things they're going to be doing. They're going to be trying to get things for you. So they're going to be on the phone trying to make connections with DHS and talking to Odette, and they're going to be talking to the feds because they have authority. The incident commander doesn't have time to do that. So you're going to need that person at some point. There's things like patient liaisons. So this patient's having a problem, they need to talk to somebody. You need a transportation sector. Who's getting rid of those? Triage person. You might say, well, why triage? Well, one of the things that happened during Katrina was they were in California during the fire. They had these patients and they were sending a nurse with each patient. Well, after about 25 patients, they looked up and said, uh-oh, we have like 3 nurses left. And we haven't necessarily even sent out all of our critical patients. So you got to have somebody that's triage, that's looking at all the patients you got, figuring out how much staff you got to stay with them and how they're going to send them out. And, they're going to have to lower some, in some cases, they're going to have to say, this was a med surg patient, I can send an MA with them, or a nurse's assistant, or even a volunteer. If it's a good one, you can send them with them, or just put them in a car. Maybe they got, they're just waiting to be discharged. If your triage person is doing their job, but at a minimum, you got to be who activates the plan and who's the incident commander. All the rest of those just grow.
Kevin, we have a question from Tracy. She wants to know, what does Nims stand for?
Okay, Nims stands for the National Incident Management System. Okay, and it, like I said, in FEMA, it's IS 700 is the training that you need.
And maybe just a really brief overview about what it does. I just want to be mindful of time. It is 11:12 and we have to be finished by noon today.
Right. So what it does is it puts everybody in the country on the same language. So if you remember back when you were a kid, and probably anybody I'm talking to here, if I use the words 10-4 to you, you know what that means. That means that's correct, 10-4. But if you talk to a kid now that's in school and you just jokingly say 10-4, they'll look at you like you're crazy because they never heard that term. Because it's not on TV anymore, and none of the emergency responders use that word anymore. They all use clear and concise language, and that's what Nims did for us. It told us we need to talk in clear and concise language. We need to repeat back, and we need to set up our command structures in this fashion. Okay, and they want you to get it started correctly so that it can grow into this massive thing that is a wildfire with 2,000 people working on it. Okay, that's basically Nims in a nutshell. These are the things that we're going to ask for. Okay, and I basically already talked about that. ETAG 9, you have to have collaboration. Okay, how do you get collaboration? ASSHare does it for you guys. Okay, any other organization that is like ASSHare does it for you. Any place you've signed agreements with collaboration with these agencies. Okay, if you're working with the county you're in, that's collaboration. You have to have collaboration, and we don't tell you who they are. Now, Department of Health on their website does have a list of collaboration options. Okay, but CMS does not tell you who you have to use. You can use whoever you want. Okay, and we're just going to ask you to describe the process to us that you're using. And we want to make sure that that you have had communications with the facility you're collaborating with, and they know your capabilities and your needs during an emergency. So if my recollection is good, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong here, I don't, like I said, I don't survey ESRDs, but I don't believe you have generators. So very, very quickly, you have a problem. People are halfway through their dialysis session, and the patient, the generator goes out. I don't know the position that puts you in, but that's something your collaboration agency needs to know, because they need to find you a place that has generators. Like I was saying, and you guys mentioned too, if you have a cooperation with an ambulatory surgical center right up the road that has a generator, then you know you could move a couple of your machines over there and finish what's the right word there? Dialyzing, is that how you say it? But
Their treatment, their dialysis.
Thank you. But yes, their treatment, and be able to send them on their way, and then maybe set it up so that your other patients that have a very short amount of time to get in there and see you, if it was an extended power loss. And my wife was asking me some things like, well, what could take out the whole state? And they have devices that can be fired like nuclear weapons, but they put out electromagnetic fields and they'll take out anything. So that would take out all of our power grid. It would take out, it might even take out some generators, but more and more and more, we're seeing the ambulatory surgical centers going to battery backups. And the battery backups would be there. People's cars, there's the Teslas, other electric cars would be sources of energy. The new Fords have numerous, the pickups have plug-in places. Those are all things I want you to think about in your plan, because give them an idea. When I throw these things out there to get you thinking, I'm thinking back to an immediate jeopardy that we had to respond to in a facility that was a facility that lost their power, and all their patients, they had inpatients, and they were all mental health patients, and they lost their power, and the generator didn't start. And in their plan, they said, our generator will start. Well, when it didn't, they didn't have a plan for anything else. And so there was all kinds of things alleged, but the point is, somebody could have taken their pickup and gave a jump start to the generator and they would have power. It was that simple if it would have been in their plan. Nobody thought of it in the middle of the emergency. It needed to be thought of prior to the emergency. So, and that's the kind of things I'm trying to motivate you to think about, those options for you, okay? But this collaboration one, just have collaboration. It's usually a pretty easy one for everybody, very seldom cited.
Kevin, should we do another poll question really quick?
Sure, yeah.
All right, let's do poll number 2. We'll just take a quick minute or two to do it. Let's see if Jesse can get this launched. There we go. Okay. Here's your question for poll number 2. Which one of the following is not required by CMS SOM to be included in your EP plan, your communication plan? These are phone numbers. So do you have to have FEMA, ASPR? Which one is not required by the SOM? FEMA, ASPR, DHS, CMS. So all of these but one are required. Give it a couple more seconds here. Which one of the following is not required?
This one was a toughie, Odette.
I know, it's a little tricky.
It's a little tricky.
We were trying to throw you for a loop.
It did. I almost called you on this one.
All right, we're just at about a minute. I think we are about to give it another 20 seconds or so, and then we'll close you out. Okay, it looks like we've got our responses. All right, Jesse, you want to close it out? There you go, Kevin. It looks like we think that ASPR is the number that is not required by the SOM to be included in our EP plan.
All right. And it's fair that everybody says that, because we briefly went over it, and I haven't got to the contact section yet to talk extensively about that. But the first thing we got to remember is this is a federal survey. And so our first clue was the Arizona Department of Health Services being listed is the one that you don't have to have in there. Although my wife jumped up and down and threw a fit when I said that. He said it's probably the number one you're going to use. So
Yep.
CMS does not require you to put the Arizona Department of Health Services in there, but you better have it in there because you're going to need it. They so many things DHS can provide for you, and there's so many times you need to contact them during an emergency. But so the answer is DHS Department of Health Services. It's actually DHS Department of Homeland Security that is the requirement. So they're all FEMA, ASPR, Department Homeland Security, and CMS are required by the SOM.
Kevin, we did have a question. It sounds like we need to bring back and check the CMS number, the 1-800 Medicare. It's possible that's a billing number, so we'll check the SOM.
That very possibly might be.
So we'll get back with them on the numbers that we need to have.
Yeah, this is Anthony feeding me this information, so.
Okay, we'll follow up on that.
We'll blame Anthony over in long-term care. He's my partner, so I can give him a hard time. All right, so that's that question. And then I'm not too familiar with these, so I'm gonna let you guys just read this real quick. It'll make more sense to you. Like I said, I don't do dialysis, so it's not as familiar to me. But you do have to address these in your plan, okay? And you can't have a special purpose renal dialysis center and not address it in your plan. Okay, and is everybody, are you aware of these, Odette?
These phone numbers?
No, these special purpose renal dialysis facilities. Are you, they call them vacation camps or?
Oh yeah, we don't have we don't have any of these right now. If the need did arise to have any of these, then we would need to hear directly from the facilities, and we would work closely with you to make sure that you were in compliance with both state and federal regulations.
Okay, and one of the things would be a requirement is you would have to have it addressed in your emergency preparedness plan. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Tag 13 is your policies and procedures. This is anybody out there question which two are required? By a show of hands, if there's anybody that does not understand which two are required. So how'd we do on that, Odette?
I don't see any hands and I don't see any questions. So I think everybody's going to get 100% on that one. Okay, good. All right, so make sure you do your facility risk assessment, your at-risk patients, details from your succession plan and your collaboration plan. Use those 4 things to create all your policies. Make sure you update them every 2 years, and include man-made and natural disasters. Tag 18, you must have a system for tracking the location of on and off duty staff and sheltered in place. CMS doesn't care how you do this, by the way. I have heard 30 methods. I went into Word and created a little thing just like my hazardous vulnerability assessment and put name a patient, where are they going? Real simple. You can do it however you want it. So you are not required to track patients who leave on their own. You know, they sign out, just put in there, patient signed out. And the same with staff. If you send staff home, you don't have to track them. But if you send a patient off somewhere to finish up their treatment, or you would have to track the patient, and you would have to track the staff member. They're still your responsibility, even though they might be down the road at XYZ ambulatory surgical center. Okay, so that one's easy. Survey is going to ask you to describe, and we're just going to want to see your system. 20, got to have a system in place to for sheltering in place. Okay. You have to have
things in there. I'm trying to get you to think of things. Consideration of care if you're trying to remember.
Actually, Kevin, can we go back just one tag? I want to just touch on this for 1 second. So this e-tag talks about the ability to develop a system to track the location of on-duty staff and sheltered patients. So this can be a little bit more complicated for ESRD facilities because they are required to track, right.
At home,
so I think there's a difference between a patient that maybe was either actively receiving treatment or needs to receive treatment in the very near future, and what the responsibility is for those patients. But then also your ongoing patients are your regular patients, and you see them every 48 hours regardless. And so one thing that we saw that ESRD facilities, several of you did really well during the fires, was relocating your patients to other facilities. So you still, quote, owned those patients. They just went, you were able to disperse them to your kind of sister facilities so that you could still manage those patients. And I think that having the ability to kind of look ahead to say, this is kind of where, you know, geographically we can place these patients to make sure that they continue to get their treatments is very, very important for this type of facility. So it's a little bit different, a little bit more specialized. It's different than like a surgical facility or an inpatient facility, because you do have patients that don't live at the facility, but that are required to come to the facility on a regular basis. So I think making sure that you're taking those situations into account where you may have to deploy those patients, and how are you going to track to make sure that they're getting their treatments, you know, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but certainly the next day they're going to need treatment. But
Absolutely.
Let us know if there needs
totally
to be further
forgot to mention that
discussion.
stuff.
That's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. You do have to have a system for that, and like I said, like you said there, they just have to know where they are and get a hold of them, and they need to know they're out without power and how they can get them places. So, and it may just be you tell them where they can go get that power or where they can go get the stuff they need. All right. So we have to have a policy and a procedure for evacuation. Okay. And I see this all the time. Well, we're going to evacuate to this pole in the parking lot. Imagine how unhelpful that was in Katrina. Imagine how unhelpful that is if that's what you write and they're in an area with wildfires. And so, and in your case, you have to have for evacuating your patients that are at home too. So there are so many things that you have to think about. ASCs have to think about infection control. What if they're right in the middle of a surgery and they have a patient that's has infection control issues and they have to evacuate right now? When are they going to stop? How long are they going to keep going? How long are they, you know, just a ton of things that need to get answered, and you can't leave that to the frontline nurses to try to make that decision in the middle of the incident, because a lot of times the person that's in command at that moment when these things happen is not normally an incident commander. They may be a charge nurse, but they don't manage incidences. And so here you are trying to manage an incident with the wind blowing in your face at 150 miles an hour. Okay, it's just needs to be very well written out for them. Think of these things. Go online, read up, get familiar with it, get passionate with this stuff. If you need other people to get involved, you know, get to know each other, get to know your surveyor. You know, just when I go out and survey, I ask a lot of, you know, they ask me a lot of questions and I help them. So think of these type of things. Okay. You're obviously gonna have to put your evacuation locations, but you need to have alternate ones also. If you have to evacuate your patients to other places, such as with electricity, how are you going to get them there? You're going to have a bus available? You're going to have cars already set up? What's your staff's responsibility? Primary and alternate routes, primary and alternate forms of communication, external sources for assistance. This is a new one. You have to have this. I cite a lot of people for not having this. You have to address what to do if someone refuses to evacuate. And you would think to yourself, well, what idiot would do that? Well, imagine you're in New Orleans when Katrina happened, and you've been in a hospital for 3 days, and maybe you were a family member, and they're telling you got to get out, and you look out the window, and there's a whole bunch of water out there with alligators and sewer in it, and you're thinking, I'm good. I'm good right here, even though without power, I'm good. So, those are the things you got to identify in this. Ton of stuff here. Ton of stuff. This is one of them you might want to read the song because it does give you a lot of ideas. Okay. This is where your at-risk stuff is really going to come in. What type of patients you're trying to evacuate. This is going to be critical that you address them all. Okay. What other facilities can you go to? One of the things that's really important here, if you got an agreement with, say, you're a mental health facility and your plan is to evacuate them to another mental health facility, well, CMS requires that you call them in advance because they may be getting patients from other places and they can't take your patients. So you have to triage there also. And obviously you have to triage when you're sending your patients off, which patients go first, which patients go last. What level of care giver has to be with each kind of patient in these situations. Because approximately how many patients you have, and approximately how many caregivers you have at any given time. You can kind of set it up in your plan, okay? This is really important here. So I try to get everybody to have a book at their nurse's station or at their staff station that is their EP book that has all their policies and procedures and all their phone numbers in it. They don't need a book with the HVA there, but they do need to have all the policies and procedures and the phone numbers, because when they evacuate, that's all they got. They got nothing. In a lot of cases, if it's a fire, they're evacuating a surgery center without their keys or their purses. So here they are in the parking lot. And think about when you're out there, what's the temperature in Arizona most of the time when you're evacuating? And it goes from extremes in certain parts of Arizona. It's extremely cold, extremely hot. People can't survive out there. So you need to have a plan. You need to have an agreement with the facility next door. I know American Vision Partners, they were picking restaurants that were nearby them. And they were setting up agreements with those restaurants because they figured they could feed their employees. So pretty ingenious, but because the fire department's not letting you back into a burning building. If you leave, you're out. So one of the things that I want you to get used to is when you do your drills, your evacuation drills for the state requirement, and you do your drills for CMS, both your EP drills and your fire drills, in the future, consider them emergency preparedness and take the book, open the plan up, start using the plan. If you don't use this plan, you're not going to get used to it. It's going to be, you're not going to be good at it when I walk in and say, what would you do if? Because that's what I already do with staff. What would you do if a tornado was coming towards this facility? I look at the HVA before I go out and survey, so I kind of know what things to ask for. But if they don't go right to that book, right to that book and start telling me what to do, then I know they're not trained. Okay. And so those are the surveyor is going to ask for. It's pretty easy there. The next one is shelter in place. FEMA site has a ton of instructions on how to shelter in place. Okay. If you're talking active shooter, this is something they need to know by memory, by muscle memory. Active shooter needs to be in your policy, but they need to know it because they cannot run to the book and start looking. It'll be over before they get done reading the book. So they need to know what to do. You need to address your volunteers if you have some, if you're sheltering in place, and you're responsible for every person inside that facility and the ones that you are, in your case for ESRDs, have assigned to you at home. Okay. So you need to have a plan for that. That's what we're going to ask for. And I'm moving along here because we got a very short amount of time here. So I'm kind of speeding things up. 24 is you have to have something for dealing with volunteers. I already addressed that for you. There's the federal ones. And if they're right down here at the bottom, the last bullet point here addresses them all, but the SOM has them in them. So all of those are licensed in all 50 states. Ask for Tracy's got a ton of resources on this one also. ETAG 26, one of the highly cited ones. ETAG 26 has 2 parts. You need to know about the 1135 waivers and how to obtain one. Go into Google and ask 1135 at a glance. Type those words in. It'll kick you out of policy. It says exactly how to request an 1135 waiver. That's the first part of your survey. That's all you need to do. You can get it right off the website of Google or CMS also. The second part is you have to have the ability to set up and establish yourself at an alternate care site. Okay. And this is why I thought it was, ingenious for my wife to come up with an ambulatory surgical center. But you have to have a plan for how you're going to do that. And it's an alternate care site that is picked by the incident commander. So it's not you, and it's not your incident commander. It's the emergencies incident commander. So if you don't have good detail here, like, well, we got to have power. All of our machines run on power. We got to have oxygen if our patients require oxygen. We got to have, certain things. You got to have that in your policy so that you can tell the incident commander, these are the minimum things we need in order to go to an alternate care site. You also need to know what you need to take, because your staff is going to be trying to figure out how to get this stuff, moved, taken and transported over there. Think about California and this earthquake. When this earthquake happens, they're going to have a bunch of stuff they got to take and move to Arizona at an alternate care site. They need to know what they're taking. Okay. So this is a critical one. The alternate care sites part is the one that gets missed the most. And one of the things that they want you to address is, how do you plan on getting it there? Because it's going to be difficult during an emergency. So if you just tell them, hey, I'm going to call U-Haul, well, I can't tell you you're wrong, but I'm going to tell you you're wrong, because U-Haul is not going to be in the area. They're going to be gone. They're going to be evacuating. Okay. They're not hanging around. And everybody and their brother is going to be trying to check out the equipment. So unless you have a contract with them that says you keep an extra set of keys and you have the ability to go in that parking lot on your own and take a vehicle, I don't know what you're going to do. So, I've heard Bob's horse trailer, that works. You might say, ooh, but your stuff will be there. 27, dialysis facilities must develop and implement emergency preparedness policies and procedures for medical assistance. How you're going to use it, how you're going to give it. The facility has to include an emergency plan for obtaining emergency medical assistance when needed. And that is very custom to your facility. And I'll be happy to read some of those when they come out, and how you guys have decided to do that. 28, make sure that the staff can confirm that emergency equipment is on the premises and readily available. You have emergency equipment limited to, but not limited to, oxygen, airways, suction, defibrillators, AEDs, artificial resuscitators, emergency drugs, and others on the premise at all times to be able to deal with an emergency. Okay, and you need to have a policy and a procedure for that. And it's the surveyor is not going to walk in and just say, show me all this stuff, although they might after they read your policy, because they're going to want to read your policy to see what kind of stuff that you say you're going to need when you identify this. And also they're going to want to ask if you plan to evacuate or anything like that, they're going to want to know things like, well, how you plan to address those drugs, how you're going to transport them, and how you're going to deal with HIPAA and that kind of stuff. So those are going to have to be in that policy. Okay, 29, you must have a plan for communications. We already talked about that. This is the spot where it says it in 2 spots again, but I'm telling you, we're going to ask for every 2 years. Okay, it's just a typo in the SOM. Okay, we're just going to ask for your communications plan. Just review your numbers.
Kevin, we did have clarification on the state side. It does say every year. So okay. You're correct. It's every 2 years on the federal side, but we will want on the state side to see the risk assessment every year.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
And so ASHare on their website has phone numbers, and they do keep them up every year. So you can just go to their website and update your phone numbers real easy from them. You don't have to call everybody. But if you do a drill, test the phone numbers. make sure they work, okay? If you're planning, like she said, she was gonna call the police department, we'll make sure she has the non-emergency number for the police department. If she said she's gonna call Asher, I'd say, well, make sure you have that phone number and it works. If you have an agreement with an ASC and you're an ESRD, make sure you call them and their phone number still works, okay? For these drills, you gotta have all the phone numbers of your staff, your entities providing service under agreement, all your patients, physicians, and all your volunteers. And I'm speeding up through these parts because they're really easy. Okay. And we're just going to ask to see those lists. This is all your federal stuff. There's the must include phone numbers. Okay. And I give you an example of Chemtrek. Chemtrek's phone number, they'll help you out if you have a chemical leak of any kind. They can tell you everything you want to know about that chemical. They track every chemical in America. So I would have them. If you're up in the mountains near the Forest Service, make sure you have their phone number. If you're near an Air Force base, make sure you got the Air Force base's phone number. If you're not nowhere near a tribal, an Indian reservation, then you don't need the tribal phone numbers, okay? But if you got something that's by you, if you got a big chemical plant, get their phone number, okay? You must have a communications plan, primary and alternate means of communication. There is a ton of them on the webs, on the SON. They list all this stuff, every bit of it. We're pretty open. You're going to have primary phones. You're going to have cell phones. You got a computer system. You got a fax system. Lots of places have ham radio operators that they have agreements with. They can call and they'll come over and start operating ham radio. Satellite telephone systems, NOAA weather systems. There's a whole bunch of systems down in the southern part of Arizona. They have their own system set up down there. They have the National Communications System, which gives you a way to get into that. All that's in the SOM. You can certainly go look at it, and it tells you how to have those systems, okay? But you got to have you got to have an alternate form. You got to have a way for sharing information about your patients, okay? During an emergency. So you got HIPAA, that's one thing, but HIPAA changes during an emergency. And so 45 CFR 164.510 talks all about the changes that come about when you end up in an emergency, okay? And you can go in there and Google, that happened in 2020, right before COVID started, in February 2020. Those new rules came out, and things such as you have 15 minutes to notify a police officer if he brings you a patient and you identify that they have COVID or any other communicable diseases. You have 15 minutes to notify them. In the past, you didn't notify them at all, okay, because of HIPAA. You also have to have ways to store your and maintain your records for HIPAA during an emergency. How are you going to do that? If electronic, real easy. If it's not, how do you plan to maintain those records? You know, if the area is going to flood on you, you got to maintain those records. There's an expectation that you have a plan in place to keep them from flooding out. Okay, ton of HIPAA stuff out there. Okay. So this is available on the CMS website. This is a flow chart, and it tells you to start at the beginning, and it says, are you a covered entity? So most of you are a covered entity, which means HIPAA applies to you. And if the answer is yes, you go down to the next thing, and it says, is the person work for the Department of Health? If you say yes or no, it tells you the next thing. And it tells you whether or not you can give them the information, and it goes all the way to the bottom to a no, flat out, or the yeses all the way down. That's available on the CMS website. If enough people ask, we'll be happy to put that on the stuff we send out to you at the end. 34, a means for communicating the occupancy's needs and the facility's occupancy and needs. I say put together a sheet that lists all the things about your facility and all the things that you can provide for the incident commander. This is the one outside of you. This is the fire department or the FEMA incident commander. Everything that you can provide and everything about your facility that might need to be known at that time. You know, they might be deciding whether or not to evacuate you immediately. They might be deciding whether or not they can evacuate people to you. They may be trying to be deciding kind of things they need to bring into you to help you evacuate, okay? So And your person that's inside the facility may not think of all the things to ask, or they might forget things because you didn't put down on a piece of paper, ask these things, think about these things. Okay. And then the other thing is needs, and that's real obvious, but they may not think of the things to ask. So that might be, you know, if you're sheltered in place for hours and the patient's a diabetic, they have needs. If you're having to feed them, do they have food allergies? Just stuff like that. I just want to get you thinking. Somebody just brought up something the other day. If you have to evacuate, and I didn't address this there, but one of the companies that made millions of dollars after Katrina was the places that went in and cleaned out refrigerators after the evacuation because the food was rotted and there was poisonous gas inside the refrigerators. So you kind of want to have in your evacuation policy maybe something to address that so that you don't poison people when they open the door. Okay. All right. So I kind of tell you all the stuff in here. If they give you a copy, you'll have a bunch of it in here for you. Okay. ETAG 36, you got to have a policy and a procedure in place for training and testing. Real easy. Training is in your policy. You have to train initially when they get hired. You have to train once every 2 years, and you have to train every time you change your policies and procedures for emergency preparedness. Okay. And you have to train everybody. If they missed all the drills, you're going to have to go train them on your after action report. Okay. Make sure you have, we're just going to ask for your policy on that. Okay. Here's your training program. I just addressed the 2-year things that you have to have. And then in drills, you guys have to have 2 cycles of drills available for me. And they are, you have to have a community-based drill and you have to have a facility-based drill. In order for them to count, you have to have used your plan and you have to have written an after-action report. Real incidences count. If they involve the community, they count as a community-based drill. If they're just within your facility, like you lost power, just you can drill to that and you can count that as facility-based as long as you do the 2 things. Okay. You have to have a community-based drill once every 2 years. And then the opposite year, you have to have a facility-based drill. A community-based drill overrides them all drills and it can count as both. And there are many options in the SOM for the type of things you can do for a facility-based drill. Okay, you can do tabletops. There's lots of things you can do. You can also collaborate with other facilities to create a community-based drill. Okay. Like I said, everybody has to, so 2 cycles, have to see 2 facility-based drills, 2 community-based drills from every facility when we come to see you. Okay. And we're going to look for those 2 things. We're going to look for, did you use your plan? And did you write an after action report? 39, this is your drills, talked about that. So this is the statement in there all about all of your staff and every 2 years. And it doesn't address specifically how you would do the ones that didn't make both of them. But we have been in the past been able to accept if you'll go over the after action report with the people that couldn't make it to be part of the drill. So this is an example of 2 different after action reports, some simple ones, some harder to see ones, or some, it depends how much you want to learn from your exercises and your real events, how much information you want to gather. You can make it as detailed as you want, but make sure at a minimum it has the 4 things. What happened, what should have happened, what you learn, what you do with that information, and then of course, who participated. Okay. FEMA can assist a lot in this and they can actually give you drills. Surveyor's going to ask for that. Those of you that have, they must provide, ESRD patients have to have orientation and training. So you have to have a policy and a procedure for that. They have to be trained for what to do during an emergency. Okay. That's unique to ESRD. This is not new. Okay. And you have to have, if you have an integrated health system, Fresenius I know does, then everybody has to participate. Everybody has to participate. That's a facility. Okay. And that's, any questions? I did pretty good, Odette.
Kevin, you did fantastic. Thank you so much.
So we just have the
That was
life
a
safety
ton of-
portion we're going to talk about after the questions.
Well, that was a ton of information. We have 10 minutes left. I do want to just go over a couple of things. So I realized that second half was a little bit quicker than we've been through. So yeah, you want to go back to slides 86 and 87. I do want to let everyone know that you will be receiving, everyone on this call today will be receiving a save the date card for our advice collaborative, which will be held September 30th. This 2022. If you haven't participated in the advice collaborative before, we highly encourage you to do it. There's tons of good information, and Kevin will be back. And so I think that what Kevin will be focusing on is maybe the second half.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, the 29th. We'll send save the date for that. And so Kevin will definitely be back and can be discussing. We can go over some of these slides in more detail if there's questions. The other thing is that we are more than happy to take questions. And so you should all have contact information for Margaret Hensel or Kevin or me. And we'd be happy to, take any questions as you start to develop these plans and put some of the thoughts around what you want to do with these plans. The other thing is you will be receiving a survey, and we would love to hear your feedback. We want to know what went well, what we could improve on, and what other topics you'd be interested in. In hearing about in the future. We're so appreciative of everyone's participation on this call. The life safety, I think Kevin will have to cover that at another time.
That should only take me like a minute and a half.
You want a minute and a half? Okay.
Yeah.
And Andre, we'll go over these questions and get back to you with the answers. But okay, Kevin, you want a minute and a half?
Yeah, it shouldn't take much more than that.
All right.
So I just throw the slide in here. Okay, so y'all can go out and look this up. You can reference S&C 13-47 LSC ESRD. And this came out in 2013. And we talked like it was a waiver. And, some of the surveyors have been talking about it. I have certainly been talking about it. It was a waiver. I talked this week to regional CMS, and they ran it up the chain. This was not a waiver. This was permanent. And so ESRDs, at this point, if they fill out this form and submit it to their state authority, they are, and they meet those two requirements, they are exempt from the life safety survey. So those of you that haven't filled this out, you might want to get that done because the surveyors are going to start asking for it. And then the second thing, they can still enforce, and this is really important, they can still enforce state law when it comes to fire code, and that's the International Fire Code 2018 edition. You have to be in compliance with that. Okay, they're not going to survey for it, but if they walk in and your fire panel's not working, they can cite that because they know that's a requirement in the International Fire Code. Okay, and there's my part.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. We have a couple more questions in the chat, but we will work on getting those answered. There's a question. Andre says, I was under the impression for staff training, it is done upon hire 3 days and additional twice a year for all staff.
That could be the state requirement, but for EP,
right,
it's every 2 years and every time you make a major change to your program.
Right. Thanks
So
for clarifying that, Kevin.
And then
Andre, we'll follow up on the state side with one of the surveyors and have them reach out to you with any other questions. And Kevin, Stephanie Schwab is asking, who should this life safety form be submitted to?
I think you're better to answer that. It has to be to the state authority. So
it has to go directly to CMS. Sorry, yes, there's an 1135 waiver submission page on CMS. We do have a waiver page for DHS, which if it gets submitted to us, then we'll forward it directly to CMS. But
this particular one, Odette, this one does go to you, us, to stay with them, to say that they it says that they have the requirements to not be surveyed.
Oh, got it. Right. Yeah,
Okay.
no, sorry. This comes directly to us.
Yes, this one would come to, I believe, our licensing part, right?
Yeah, medical.licensing. The other thing is, as long as you have it signed by the administrator and dated before we come for survey, you can always pull it out when the surveyor gets there.
That would work too. Yeah, that would work. Yeah, we're gonna. I think didn't we say we were gonna send this letter out to everybody?
We will send the slides, and then I think we sent out your handout, Kevin, but we'll forward that as well.
We did.
Okay, yeah, Margaret forwarded it with the invite. And then, like I said, everybody will get an invitation or save the date for the Advice Collaborative as well, if you want more information on emergency preparedness plans.
That sounds good, and I really appreciate everybody's time. And I know I rushed at the end, and I'm sorry about that. I tend to be a little windy, but you know, always questions. We have our surveyor of the day that you can call anytime, and they will get questions to me if you ask them those questions. And your surveyor that's out there may be able to answer those questions. They have the SOM available to them, and they have kind of a cheat sheet in their hand that they're looking at. They can answer questions for you. So we absolutely, and so does CMS, want you to be successful at this. There is, like I said, we count on you to provide these services for everybody. So we will do everything in our power to make you successful at this. I'm really happy that everybody put this together, and this came from the industry, this request. So thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for your participation.